Do you ask why I look so haggard, as if caused by prolonged insomnia? Why do I flinch involuntarily every time the kitchen cabinet door, which is propped up from the inside, opens by itself? And why, in my early 30s, do I already have grey hair on my temples? Okay, listen to this creepy story. You'll probably laugh incredulously, as many people I've tried to tell my fears to have done. Not so long ago, I would have joined you myself. Just a couple of months ago, sitting in a lighted kitchen in the evening with a glass of brandy in my hand, I would embarrassingly and falsely echo the mocking laughter of my friends. Now I no longer know whether to cry or laugh. Every morning, standing in front of the mirror, I check to see how many grey hairs have been added during another nightmare night. I've been afraid to sleep for a while now, or rather, I'm afraid that I'll wake up in the middle of the night, awakened by a quiet creak of the door, and a muffled voice from the depths of the closet calling my name. It all started about 2 years ago. At that time, our firm was nearing completion of a major project. As usual, we did not meet the deadlines, and had to return home almost at midnight. Exhausted, I could only drink a bottle of beer and, without waiting for the end of the evening news, go to bed. I never complained about sleep, especially during such periods. The alarm clock should have rung at 6 sharp, so that by 7:30 I could finally crawl out of bed and start a new day of hard labor. But I woke up much earlier. My eyes remained closed, and for some time I could not understand what was the cause of my sudden awakening. Suddenly I felt that there was someone in the room. Now I can say with certainty that someone was there. At that time, it was only a vague sensation, difficult to put into words. Lying facing the wall on the very edge of the couch, it seemed to me that someone was standing in the corner. On the one hand, I couldn't know if there was someone there, and there couldn't be anyone there, but somehow I felt the presence of some alien being. You would probably say what all the psychiatrists I consulted would say. Many people at times have this feeling that someone is watching them, and so on and so forth. If that was the end of it, I would have happily agreed with you. But soon footsteps were heard. After standing near the closet for a few seconds, as if letting me realize its presence, it went into the kitchen. The footsteps were careless. The creature felt like a master, and made no attempt to hide its presence. They were the footsteps of a lonely man who suddenly had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. The sounds were distinct, but I did not hear them as usual, but rather felt them, as if they penetrated directly into my brain. Witnesses of telepathic communication claim that a voice is heard directly in the head. In the same way I perceive the presence of this being. The footsteps seemed to be born in my brain, and at the same time I could clearly visualize the place from which they came. I felt, rather than heard, the flick of a switch in the kitchen. There was no fear at that moment. It came later, when the creature's visits became more persistent and regular. That first time, only a few faint knocks came from the kitchen, as if someone was moving dishes left on the table. Then the light switch flicked again, and footsteps followed back to the closet. And then came the sound that would haunt my nightmares for the rest of my life, the quiet creak of the door opening in the middle of the night's stillness. I lay there for a few minutes, waiting for it to continue, but all was quiet. Only the alarm clock ticked softly, and somewhere far away the alarm system howled. Finally, assuring myself that it was only a dream, I calmed down, and in the morning the incident seemed to me trifling and ridiculous. Busy with work, I almost forgot about the incident and only remembered it a couple months later. Then I came home late from a party, a little tipsy, and hastily threw off my clothes and fell into bed. As you might guess, I woke up again long before dawn, which in my condition was quite surprising. Through the closed bathroom door, I could hear the muffled murmur of water running from the faucet. I didn't even pay much attention to it at first. The alcohol was doing its job, pulling me into a sleep filled with fragments of dreams. In the morning, most likely, this incident would have been forgotten, just like what had happened earlier. How naive people can be. Sleep was about to take me back into its welcome embrace when suddenly there was a soft splash, as if someone was washing their hands. Holding my breath, I listened. The splash was repeated, and then the murmuring stopped. I could literally feel someone turning on the faucet, though I couldn't hear it, of course. It was a strange feeling. Then the door opened heck. I'd swear on anything that through my tightly clenched eyelids I could make out a dim light. The light switch clicked, and in that moment fear scrambled deep in my heart for the first time. I used to take comfort in the fact that all the sounds came from the neighboring apartments, even though our building was old, with thick brick walls. If there were any noises coming through the thick brick walls, they were to faint. Of course, my half-asleep mind could paint a picture, but when the light switch clicked, I realized that everything was happening in my apartment. I heard another sound. It was very faint, at the limit of audibility, but it couldn't be mistaken for anything else. A broken spring in the switch near the bathroom jingles with every click. This ringing is very quiet, and unless you are aware of it, you probably won't hear it, at least not during the day. But now, at night, in the absolute silence, when not even a sound came from the street, it sounded quite distinct. I'll bet you I heard the damn spring rattle. From the bathroom door to the bedroom entrance was literally a few steps, and after taking those steps, something froze on the threshold. The sounds of the footsteps were quite strange, not quite human. Feet slapped the floor as if the walker was wearing flippers, and yet not too loudly. Just a quiet slap, slap, slap. But I'm pretty sure a barefoot person doesn't walk like that. Stopping at the entrance to the bedroom, it froze for a while. I imagined it peering at me. Then, after a few languid seconds, the flip-flops proceeded to the closet. The door creaked twice, something inside turned, and finally it went quiet. Thank God I was sober, or I wouldn't have been able to sleep until morning. But, intoxicated, in a few seconds I was snoring, forgetting about my fear. After this incident, for the first time I dared to talk about what had happened. I half-jokingly mentioned it at a party. My friends laughed with pleasure at the scary story. Only one girl I didn't know changed her face. She looked at me strangely, but, without letting me develop the topic, moved the conversation in another direction. Giving in to the mood of those around me, I laughed myself, but the next night it happened again, and in a worse form. This time it was going to the bathroom. Sounds funny, but believe me, I'm not having any fun at all now. First, it came from the back of the closet, grumbling, mostly unintelligible. It nevertheless gave the impression of some horrible prayer in an incomprehensible, unreal language. The creak of the door blade stabbed at my nerves, sending shivers down my spine. And again the quiet slap, slap, slap. The bathroom door opened and closed, and, after a few seconds of silence, no murmuring, no squeaking of the seat, something proceeded to the kitchen. It stood there in complete silence and returned to the bedroom. Like the previous visit, it froze on the threshold, and then walked to the couch and stopped right next to me. My heart hammered so loudly that I thought it might have heard. However, pretending to be asleep as best I could, I tried to breathe evenly and deeply. I couldn't hear the creature's breath, just some quiet hissing and crackling, like a gramophone on the last track of a record. And the smell. The whole room was filled with its odor. It smelled like a damp corner of an old barn rot, mold, and something else elusive, but just as nasty. I lay on my right side, and suddenly I was startled to feel it climbing over me, settling into the empty space. It wriggled, like a cat getting comfortable, and then went quiet. We were now lying just a few centimeters apart. I could barely pretend to be asleep. I could feel it staring at me. It stared at me with the cold, meaningless stare of fish eyes, as if it knew I was awake and was trying to catch me. A panic attack prevented me from even opening my eyes, and despite this, I soon fell asleep. It hasn't been back in the closet since. It comes out of it, wanders around the apartment for a while, sighing and grumbling in its own incomprehensible language, then settles down on an empty seat. It looks at me. I know it's staring, until I fall asleep. Strangely enough, I fall asleep pretty quickly in these cases. Sometimes the other half of the couch is occupied, and you know what I mean. On nights like that, it doesn't show up. Sometimes I'm ready to drag a dirty, drunken beggar off the street just so I don't have to hear that squeak. I'm afraid to fold the couch. Even though I don't know what will happen, it will probably stomp around, sigh, and go back into the closet. But what if it doesn't? You're asking why not lock the closet. Believe me, I've tried it. There is a simple lock in the door that closes with a small key, so the child doesn't see the Christmas present before it's time. I did so one evening, but it didn't add to the peace of mind. It felt like things had gotten worse. Something inside was saying, "You better open it." But with the key in my fist, I went to sleep. I woke up seconds before it tried to come out. Half asleep, I heard it push the door open, again and again. Then there was a series of thumps. The dream faded away. Clutching the key in my sweaty palm, I waited in horror. The blows were insistent, not drums, but thuds, as if they were trying to break the barrier with their shoulders. When it seemed as if the door would fly out with another push, it suddenly fell silent. I thought it had calmed down, but suddenly a horrible scream came from the closet. Half scream, half moan, filled with despair, nightmarish pleading, and wild anger. At that moment, I wanted to scream and run out onto the landing, kicking in the front door. The only thing that stopped me was the wild terror that gripped my body. I didn't even have the strength to pull back the blanket, gritting my teeth and clenching my eyes so tightly that my head ached. I expected it to break out of its precarious prison and attack me. One more sound from the closet and I would either wet myself or be a stutterer for life, or maybe both. But it was gone. I never got to sleep that night. I lay there until dawn, clutching in my right hand the key that had become an almost fatal talisman. When it was light, I went to the kitchen and drank a full glass of vodka. After sniffing my hand, smelling of sweat and copper, I went to the closet. The key turned in the lock with a click, like a cock trigger. Feeling either brave or insane, I opened the door. There was nothing inside, of course. Just a couple of suits on a rack, an old leather jacket, a few boxes of junk, and a burned-out iron. On the inside of the door hung some kind of rag that crumbled to dust at the first touch. I spent the next few nights at a friend's house, lying about the repairs. But you can't stay at other people's houses forever. And expecting the worst, I went back after all. The first night home, after trying to lock the closet, it touched me. At first, as usual, it stood next to the couch, looming over me and grumbling deafeningly. Sometimes I think I recognize familiar syllables in that grunt. Sometimes its muttering becomes more intelligible. And then I think it's trying to say my name. It climbed over me and piled heavily on my chest. At first it lay still, and then it reached out to me with something cold and long, snake-like. Through the thin blanket it tickled my arm, if big bugs were crawling on it. Then it touched my face. The touch was disgusting beyond belief. It wasn't like when someone touches your nose, cheek, or lips. It touched my whole face at once, groping me with dozens of slippery lashes as cold, wet snow fell on my face. Why didn't I throw out the closet? I don't. I can't. It scares me more than the nighttime visits. At least nothing bad has happened yet. Not yet. You won't believe this, but I'm really scared. Me, who's been through 2 wars and made over 30 parachute jumps. I, who fell through the ice a few years ago and survived with a cold mind. I'm scared. Every night when I go to bed, I'm afraid. Afraid of my fear. I am afraid that when I wake up in the middle of the night, I will no longer be able to bear the deep horror and open my eyes.